So I accidentally figured out how to film IMAX, and this is something that's actually a little bit bigger than Nolan ever intended. It's a little bit taller, it's a little bit more of a square, and I did this on a Canon R5, a camera that most people nowadays would typically write off. And the setup to get there was actually really fun because I was doing things like colored rubber bands on my monitor and sticking to a lot of old school techniques. Now, this is something that was definitely built and not something that you just buy right off the shelf. And now stay with me because this is definitely a Franken-rig, and on top of that, it's gotta be one of my most favorite setups that I've ever built. So hey, what's up everybody, it's DP Manny Moreno, and today we're gonna be doing something that's genuinely pretty bizarre. We're going to be shooting a full 8K DCI Vertiscope setup on the Canon R5. And real quick, just to give you guys a quick disclaimer, the camera is mine and the lenses were a long-term loaner from Laowa. Now, you guys know that I do a lot of marketing stuff for SmallRig, and so just to give you guys a heads up, some of the equipment and gear that I'm going to be using is a mixture of my own stuff and some of SmallRig's. Now, this is not an ad, and this is not a sponsored video from Laowa or SmallRig, and this is going to be just something that I kind of passionately do on the side. Now, what I mean is building these little Franken-rigs. And so just to give you guys a heads up, I'm going to be going over this Vertiscope build and how in the process we accidentally discovered filming in IMAX format. So what the heck is Vertiscope? And so stay with me because it's going to get a little bizarre. Now, because we're starting this crazy math with the 8K DCI on the R5, we're looking at an 8192 by 4320 aspect ratio. So when you rotate the camera vertically, you don't vertically adjust your anamorphic squeeze. You leave them at the horizontal option. So instead of desqueezing your horizontals, you're actually desqueezing your verticals. So stay with me because once you desqueeze that, you're gonna get an 8640 by 8192 pixel frame. That's actually a 1.05521 aspect ratio, which is taller and squarer than the 1.4321 IMAX. Now, almost a perfect square, but not quite. And it doesn't just float between horizontal and vertical, it allows you to capture both, plus other multiple aspect ratios within. So let's go ahead and put an asterisk on that because we're gonna be talking about that later on. So here's the interesting thing about this. We're now able to get the holy grail and carve it out of what our current deliverable is, which is what's gonna matter here in a second. Okay, so Nolan's true IMAX is a 14321, which is currently the largest deliverable in cinema, and only a handful of theaters on the planet can even show that. Now, a quick disclaimer because I know a lot of IMAX purists are starting to type away. Before you do, hold on, because we're going to circle back onto some numbers here later on. Because the Vertiscope gives us a 1.05 to 1, this is going to land us with an 8640 wide by a 8192 tall. So let's go ahead and talk deliverables. What do you actually do with a canvas that big? Well, you're allowed to carve and also reframe, but there's going to be a small caveat to it. So from one single take, I can pull over 6 different deliverables, whether it is a 239 to 1, whether it is a 2 to 1, whether it is a straight 16 by 9, 17 by 9, or anything for social media, whether it be a perfect 1 to 1 or a 9 by 16 for any of my social media deliverables. The other thing is that if I wanted to, I can also stay within the 1.055 near square or also deliver a 143 IMAX deliverable. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you are now able to do this with one capture without having to lose so much of your sensor data and or resolution whenever you start to crop down or having to match different types of camera setups. And from there, you're able to maintain the same optical performance throughout all different deliverables. Now, this isn't to say that all these 6 deliverables that I just walked you through all happened by accident. None of them were by accident in the editing space. Now, what I mean by that is that all of this got decided in pre. When you decide to hit record, you need to know right up front. I was simultaneously protecting my widescreen and vertical crops as well. I was deciding to live in a moment where I can have all my different frames within one frame, and a 2-person conversation is gonna actually be the perfect type of torture test for this type of setup. Because dialogue tends to be one of those scenes that sets you up where when somebody's talking and you try to reframe, the framing kinda ends up becoming more of a compromise. Now, when it comes down to it, when you frame for the square, you end up having to sacrifice the ability to reframe later on. And that's going to be something we're going to talk about, so put an asterisk on that too, and let's go ahead and move on and talk about the look. So let me tell you about the moment this whole entire look actually just settled for me. One of the friends on camera actually happened to be my wife, who is a filmmaker and a creative in her own right. And when we both sat down to watch the dailies, we put one of our own personal grades on it, and we were shocked and awe. This wasn't just something that was going to give us, oh, it looks like a movie. No, this was something that we were able to deliver multiple deliveries, have a high quality look, and a characteristic to it that would be resonating through multiple deliverables. Now, one of the things about this is that you don't need the latest and greatest cameras to make this happen. Whether it was full frame or Super 35, as long as you have a 16:9 or 17:9 deliverable, you're able to make this happen. Now, mind you, we got 8K worth of detail rendered through anamorphic optics, and that was what was able to help us and give us such a big deliverable. This is where we're going to get into the raw workflow of this, and there's going to be an entire dedicated video on just the post-production workflow of this. So we decided to record in Canon RAW internally, because this gave us the absolute max amount of data that the camera itself could capture. It had given us a post-production freedom that didn't just lock us into Canon C-Log 3. And because of that, we were able to fix and change our color gamut in post. Now let's just be honest, because the Canon Log 2 workflow in post just happens to give us a much better workflow. Now, shooting this way actually changed the way that we decided to do pre-production and even on-set camera testing. When your camera can only roll for a few minutes and your frame is actually entirely demanding, you can't just grab your camera and spray and pray. You have to know why you're actually framing for your shot before you ever roll. So let's start talking about all the other asterisks and all the other challenges that came with this build. There were challenges along the road here, and the biggest challenge that I had is that this is the Canon R5. Overheating is still an issue, and I wasn't able to cool the camera the way that I had intended. Because I was rigging this in a vertical manner, I was actually blocking my access to mounting my cooling fan. We're going to be making a build video dedicated and talking about this, and possibly even overcoming that challenge, so that's going to be a video for another day. But all in all, I wasn't able to cool down the camera, and because of that, recording 8K RAW, I was limited to only a certain amount of recording time. Rubber bands. That's right. On Vertiscope, once you squeeze and rotate, you are not exactly shooting blind, but you're going to be guesstimating. No monitor on this earth gives you the custom guides, the live desqueeze, and the rotation the actual rig needs to sit right. So I decided to build the fix myself. I ended up printing out a chart and I held it up in front of the setup, and I mapped out exactly where my crop lines would land once everything got desqueezed. Then I decided to transfer those marks straight onto my monitor with the use of single colored rubber bands. So staying inside the line meant that my wide crop would be safe. No software, no fancy overlays, and just a chart with some rubber bands and some simple math was all it really took to fix this challenge. These lenses have a constant t4.5 on the widest aperture. So keep in mind, I would either have to have a lot of light or a very high ISO, and the Canon R5 is a single base ISO camera at ISO 800. So being inside of a coffee shop was probably not going to be the best decision, so we decided to go outside. And luckily we had so much light that I was able to just drop an ND12 and be able to bring my exposure baseline down to a workable exposure that still gave us a lot of data. However, we also were hit with the challenge that it was a cloudy day, so our light and our color temperature was very inconsistent. So like I said, proper planning and preparation is what was able to help us overcome this task. All we had to do is reposition the camera and the talent in a way where we were able to maintain an entire control of our environment. Now, aside from the challenges real quick, because I had promised you guys no BS math, let's go ahead and start cashing in on those asterisks from earlier. Okay, so Reddit and others have pushed back on this conversation because IMAX is not strictly a resolution number, it is the certification tied to the image quality and the aspect ratio. So here's the actual math that I was talking to you guys about before. So take true IMAX 14321. Now shape it with the 8640 pixel width that we're currently using, and you're gonna end up getting about 6042 pixels. That is over 2000 pixels shorter than what we're currently producing. So it's the same width with a much more dramatically shorter frame. That 8641 by 8192 number is a delivery canvas, not the actual captured resolution. My real capture is 35.4 megapixels of the true 8K sensor data. but once it is desqueezed, it is roughly a 71 megapixel container. So I know that some of you might already be ready to start typing out and saying that you could just shoot open gate and then crop it down to get IMAX. And you would have a valid argument, especially with the fact that Panasonic, Fuji, Sony, and Canon are now doing open gate. Nikon, at the time of this recording, still happens to be the only major holdout. So just shoot wide, crop tight, and call it a day, right? Well, no, not exactly, and there's a reason. So every single one of those brands happens to lose somewhere between 5 to 7%, trimming down to that true IMAX shape. Might sound like a big win, but after that trim, the biggest of them walks away with about a 31 megapixel resolution, and it doesn't even happen to be from the most commonly used brand in the lineup. Vertiscope, on the other hand, loses an even bigger chunk. We're talking about a 26% loss, but it still happens to land with a massive 52 megapixel resolution. And it's still utilizing an organic anamorphic look, one that you don't have to fake in post, and still happens to be the type of IMAX imagery somebody comes to expect. Okay, so is full 8K Vertiscope on an R5 even actually worth doing? And real talk is, if you're the type of individual who's trying to run and gun, has no time to build and or no patience for guessing at your frame, then this is definitely not going to be your daily driver type of setup, and that happens to be okay. So here's where I want to leave you with Vertiscope. This was me never really being serious, and I was just playing around when I decided to just kind of go down a rabbit's hole. And along the way, I ended up discovering some pretty cool things about it. And I realized that when you get a little creative out and start to rig outside the box, you kind of start to discover something that some people never really would consider. For example, being able to deliver an IMAX deliverable aspect ratio while still maintaining an anamorphic look, and or also being able to reframe and have different deliverables all with one simple setup. For years, we've always accepted that there always has to be a norm to what you capture, whether it's 16:9, 2:4:1, 1:1, or even just vertical formats. And with something like Vertiscope, you're now able to do all of them and also have the creative freedom to still play around and also discover other aspect ratios that you might find for whatever deliverable you're looking to deliver. So before we sign off, I just wanted to say a big thanks to Laowa for the glass that had started this entire obsession, and to Atomos, Lexar, and to SmallRig for the monitor, the cards, and the rig that makes this whole entire thing happen. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and if you're in the market for a used camera, make sure you check out your local camera store. And if you want, check out online resources like Adorama.com. They tend to have a lot of bodies that still have a lot of life left in them and a lot of great stories to be told. So make sure you go out there, capture something, and tag me because I'd love to take a look at it. And I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll be seeing you guys on the next one. Peace.